Well, good morning, Crossroads family, and welcome to our Adult Sunday School class. Last week, we finished out Daniel chapter 12, which was the end of the book. This week, we're going to do an overview of the first 6 chapters. Now that we've been through it in some detail, we're just going to do a bird's eye view and kind of some summary stuff, and a little bit of material that we never really were able to touch on during that time. So the book is divided into 12 chapters, and the first 6 are historical narrative. The second 6, chapter 7 to 12, are visions, for the most part, that Daniel has. There are some visions in the first chapters too, but they're not ones given directly to him. There are visions that are given, like to Nebuchadnezzar, that he interprets. I do have a handout up on our webpage for you. I would encourage you, if you haven't already, to download that. Some of the print on here, and I'm going to be showing it on the screen, but it's kind of small, and it's a lot easier to read in print if you print it out on a full page. But this is a timeline of Daniel's life. His life is the yellow bar. It begins back in Judah, and then the bulk of it is laid out in the land of Babylon, the Babylonian Empire. Let's see, and I think you've got a copy of that.
Oh.
I can tell you guys are thirsty again.
I was getting dry.
So this week, since Kris kind of went to the moon over his birthday cake blast, I got him some Star Blast Cola or Bang, whatever that is.
Ew.
And John, since
Star
you
Blast.
always reminded me of the gentleman who sang on the album Purple Haze,
Who was that?
Jimi Hendrix. I got you Purple Haze, and then you can fight over who gets the white and who
No
gets
way.
the dark chocolate bunnies.
So we can use these as the bunny trail.
No, you can't, because you have a bunny this week, I think. I
Okay.
got him because
We
I
do.
wasn't sure we were going to receive the dabbing bunny, but I see that it is here. So.
I'm glad you were thinking ahead.
Yep.
The dabbing bunny. I don't know if you can see that out there.
Yes. Yes, thank you, Cordy. I think it was Cordy and not Ari.
It is.
It is
yes.
Cordy.
Yep.
She's a
So,
good
all right.
artist. So
I will let
theoretically,
you guys
if
enjoy.
either one of you goes off tangent,
Yes.
we hold up the dabbing bunny to indicate this is a bunny trail.
I did not open
Wouldn't
them to
off
see if they
tangent
smell
be
good
on
either,
subject? Isn't that
No.
off tangent?
No.
Okay. That tangent was like related going off. So if you're off tangent, wouldn't that be on?
Wow.
Okay.
Wow.
How's the Star Blast?
We're
That
just
is
getting started.
really good. That's a blast. Literally.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
You can feel the dryness.
It melts
Really?
away, doesn't it? You're like, I feel good.
Purple Haze there, John?
Yeah, in my brain.
Do that. Breathe out a little bit again. I saw it. Oh, man. Where was I?
No one knows.
It's pretty good, isn't it? Literally, no one knows.
Well, you were just talking about the life of Daniel, how it spanned
Oh,
over.
yes. Oh, yes.
Good,
okay.
someone was listening, I think.
Another interesting thing about that. So, first half, second half. The first 6 chapters run chronologically. They're in order chronologically. The second 6, 7 through 12, are also given in chronological order, but the 2 sets overlap.
Okay.
So if you read 1
I'm
to
on.
6,
I'm on with it.
you get down to almost the end of his life. Then you go to 7, and you have to jump back a little bit.
Okay. So altogether, they're not chronological, but
Right, but the 2 sets are both chronological.
okay.
Yeah. So, the first half of the book covers more than just the first half of his life, or whatever, however that goes.
Okay.
I don't know if that made sense, but okay.
It did.
Thank
It
you.
scares me a little.
Thank you. That's very kind of you. So let's jump right in here. Chapter 1 includes his deportation from the land of Judah to the land of Babylon. And apparently he lived in the capital city of Babylon for most of his life. Now, obviously, he traveled as one of the chief executives of the empire. He would have, and we also read about that in some of these chapters too, that he went to different places. But it seems like for the majority of his life, his home was in Babylon. And that's interesting here a little later on, because of some of the other people that we know were in that region were in that city, that then obviously he would have interacted with, Jewish leaders that he would have interacted with. So chapter 1 includes the testing of him and the other 3 Hebrew kids. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego is how we most commonly know them.
We use their Babylonian names.
Babylonian names.
That's funny.
Hananiah.
Okay.
Mishael, Azariah. Thank you. What? No, they didn't eat garlic. They might eat garlic.
Is that the
Getting a
first
question
question
from
we
the
got?
audience. Yeah. Well, they didn't want to eat the king's meat. Sure, I mean garlic.
Because it was sacrificed meat, wasn't it? It was for
Yes.
ceremonial.
And some of it was just meat that was forbidden for Jews.
Oh,
Could have been something like pork. Could have been something like rabbit. Could have been some kind of unclean seafood. Camels were not clean to eat. I don't know.
I don't know if they still are.
They ate camel. Yeah. Camel burgers. So this chapter takes place mostly in the year 605 BC. That's the year of the first deportation. I think, I'm going to guess Daniel was about 16 years old.
It seems like it.
You know, if you make him too much younger, it seems difficult to imagine him standing up and doing some of the things he did in that context. Like if he was 10, you know, being assigned then as a ruler in Jerusalem, in Babylon. But if we go much later than that, he is really old when he's at the end of his ministry. So that's a guess, but I'm going to say about 16 years old. That would put his birth date back in about 621 BC. So
So he lives 80 some years
Yeah.
that we know of.
yeah,
Does he record his death?
no.
I didn't think so.
No. But yeah, if he's about 16 here, yeah, we'll see him in his 80s by the time we get to Lion's Den. He's also, by the end of the chapter, appointed to some kind of royal court position. Out of all the youths that were trained, he was one of the top performers, him and his buddies. So even in the first chapter, we already see him being tested and with regard to food, and then
Tested by
approved.
God or tested by Nebuchadnezzar?
Well, specifically,
Kind of both, huh?
yeah, specifically by Nebuchadnezzar. Well, and even the guy that was in charge of him, you know, gonna give you this food that you want, the veggies and the garlic, as it were, and see if that, if you do well on it. But yeah, it was a test of his faith too.
Yeah.
I don't see how you can avoid that conclusion.
It was kind of his first chance to stand up for righteousness.
Yeah, he was tested pretty early on.
Yeah.
Yep. Are you going to go with the flow and do things that you're not supposed to, or are you going to take a stand and maybe pay it? He could have paid a
And
price for that.
it was kind of it's a big deal, but it's kind of a small thing that a lot of people would just overlook, and it would bring him to the next step of opening up sinful behavior.
Yeah. It
But
would
he
have
kind
been
of
an easy slide
nipped it
down.
in the bud.
There's nobody there keeping track of him. You know, pulled away from parents or any kind of elders or synagogue people, priests, anybody like that. That's pretty good money. Okay. I'm told you this is an overview, so I'm going to move on now.
Very good.
Chapter 2, which takes place shortly after that. We're counting down because we're BC, so roughly 603 BC, which would put him around age 18 or so. The king is still Nebuchadnezzar, and this is the chapter where Nebuchadnezzar has a dream of a large statue and would not even tell his people what the dream was. You
Yeah,
know that one.
pretty tough one.
It was,
At least the Pharaoh
rough.
gave him the dream.
I just need the interpretation. Yeah. And Nebuchadnezzar was about to kill everybody
Yeah.
when Daniel's friends came and told him, and he asked for and was given time, and God gave him the dream and the interpretation.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, another pretty amazing chapter. It's also an important chapter because, as you recollect, this statue is made out of 4 or 5 different kinds of metals that represented upcoming nations. And so in that sense, it's also visionary prophecy, stuff that is to come.
Mm-hmm.
With Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonian kingdom being the head of gold.
That'd be kind of a tough one if it didn't give us the answer.
It would.
Yeah, there'd
We
be
would
a
have
lot of
no
speculation.
idea.
I mean, the one with clay would still be kind of going. I guess some people think it is kind of going with the clay and metal mix, but
Yeah.
like the Roman Empire or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we get the interpretation, which is really nice.
Yep. You ready to move on to chapter 3?
Boy, you are flying.
Right? Okay. Chapter 3 is the 3 Hebrew youths
Fiery
in the
furnace.
fiery furnace. Yeah. A date is not given for this. There are a couple of ancient historians, I think Herodotus, maybe Josephus, that place this around the time of the destruction of Jerusalem in 587. So I have placed it here around about 585, so right after the last major wave of exiles had come in. If that's the right time, then Daniel's about 36 years old, which is interesting, a middle-aged, and his 3 friends presumably would have been about the same age. So
Now, Daniel's not really mentioned during that fiery furnace episode.
he's
is he?
not. No, I
Out
remember.
of town.
Yeah, I remember when we studied that. It's like, where's he at? Is he out of town on some visit to another capital city or something? But he's just not mentioned.
Yeah, I
Which
always
is,
thought that was kind of interesting. I always that story. The line I really like out of it is, I don't know if he's going to save us or not, but whether he does or not, we're still going to serve him.
Yeah. What
And
a powerful story.
we were talking about it last night during the study. Is why do we serve God? And it's out of love and gratitude of what He's done for us. It's not that we're going to get a reward. The reward is actually being obedient and loving the Lord and doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. You remember what happened to those 3 guys at the end?
I remember what happened to the guy who was putting them in.
He had this dry cough.
He kind of disintegrated, didn't he?
Starts hacking and wheezing and
Well, I don't think he had time to.
turn into a piece of bacon.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Okay, I mean, they came out, and their ropes were gone, and their clothes didn't even smell of fire, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there was a 4th person, like the Son of God, they said, with him.
Yeah. That's all true. The answer I was looking for was that they got
Dang.
promoted. Which was which was a tangent for me to run back to
Another?
chapter 2. Waiter. You haven't cleaned
I'm
that one
not
out
stimulating enough to get the right answer here.
I was going to jump back to chapter 2 just to remind you that at that point, Daniel was promoted to the ruler of Babylon, the capital of the Babylonian Empire, the province of Babylon.
After the
Chapter
dream?
2, after the statue dream.
Okay.
That's way early in his life. And
So he was like 20?
apparently he continues, that's important. He continues to be high up in the Babylonian government throughout his life. And his friends are here too, with the fiery furnace thing. So, yeah,
So they get promoted.
yeah. Chapter 4. Date on this one is difficult to establish. It's not given in the text. There's no reference to time. If you remember when we went through this, I kind of hazarded a guess that it was around 570, 571, which would place it right at the end of Nebuchadnezzar's 13-year siege of the city of Tyre, and might even explain why he gave up on that siege. Because of this event, he could no longer function, and so they gave up on the siege of Tyre. It's hard to say with certainty. If that's correct, that it happened about that time, then Daniel may well have been about 50 years old when that vision was given to Nebuchadnezzar. And of course, it was a vision that I think was intended to steer Nebuchadnezzar away from his pride. And it gave him a warning, but he didn't listen to it. And so he was humbled. For 7 seasons. We don't know how long that took. It's often assumed it's 7 years. But the text doesn't actually state that specifically.
It was at least a couple.
It's a bit more ambiguous. If it's 7 years, then you also have to bump it back from his death at least 7 years. It can't be right at the end, which may help place it a little bit too. But again, that's an assumption that it was 7 years.
And is it true, or is it just kind of heavily insinuated that he actually became a believer, Nebuchadnezzar?
Well, he didn't profess faith in Jesus. We'll put it that way. You don't know what to do with that, do you? Did he or did he not become a believer? I need another drink. Well, he makes an astounding profession with regard to God.
Yeah.
In fact, yeah.
Which is what they were doing back then, rather than
King of Kings, the Lord of Lords.
I mean, it's a promise of one to come. The one to come. I don't think many were thinking of his name.
On the other hand, from a secular standpoint, there's no evidence that this Jewish religion ever gained inroads into Babylon. Like that, all of a sudden you can see.
Well, you got the wise men who came from that area to things. So I think it
could have been an ongoing tradition there.
Yeah.
But you don't see, like, all of a sudden in the archaeological record,
Okay.
they're no longer worshiping the same gods, or
Okay.
There's nothing obvious from that perspective that would lead you to say, oh, there was a massive transformation across the country.
Right.
Again, that doesn't necessarily say much about Nebuchadnezzar personally, but yeah, I don't know. It'll be fascinating to find that out at some point. Yeah. That was chapter 4, the tree dream, and then of course Nebuchadnezzar's he was humbled, sent out to eat grass for 7 periods of time. Chapter 5, we have a solid date on. This is the handwriting on the wall during the reign of Belshazzar. And that very night, the city fell to the Medes and the Persians. So we know that's 539 BC. If Daniel was 16 when he came to Babylon, then at this point he would be about 82.
Okay.
It's going to be toward the end of his life. I should say, probably. What I meant to say there was it's toward the end of his recorded activities.
There you go.
So we do have some that are later than this, a couple of them, but not by many years. So our king is Belshazzar. Nabonidus was his father, and the two of them ruled as co-regents for most of the reign of Nabonidus.
That's pretty good. Not many father and sons get along.
For that
Get along very well.
Well, okay, so this was also weird because part of the reason that worked was Nabonidus took off.
Oh yeah.
He lived out in the desert with a large chunk of the military for some years.
Yeah. Didn't they die nearly at the same time? Something like that.
Yeah, his death is a little obscure. Nabonidus' death. The ancient historians give a couple different accounts of that.
Okay. All right.
So that's chapter 5. We have one more, chapter 6. And this is Daniel in the lion's den. It's funny to me how often Daniel is portrayed in the lion's den as a young buck in Sunday school pictures and that kind of stuff. But this was during the reign of Darius. Wow, we had a big discussion about that when we went through this. Who was Darius? Possibly just a local king of Babylon under Cyrus.
Okay.
But it is post-Babylonian Empire.
Okay.
So we know that Daniel is an old guy by this point. If he was 16 when he came to Babylon, he'd be about 83 at this point.
So it wasn't long until Daniel's enemies duped the king into a false decree and like a year.
Yeah, maybe less. Yeah, we don't have specific like day, month kind of information there, but yeah, he's working under a king of a new and different empire at this point. So, and you might note there too that this is about the time of the first return of exiles from Babylon to Jerusalem.
Ezra and Nehemiah and all that.
And we'll see this is about the same time as chapter 9, Daniel's prayer, with regard to that return. It's hard to know exactly what order to put these in. But those all happened probably within a year or so of each other. It would be interesting to know if the lion's den took place first, and after that, if Darius and Cyrus said, okay, you guys can go back to the land, or if Daniel and the lion's den took place post-return. I don't know. They're right about the same time. Yeah, it would be fun to know.
That king was very open to all the different cultures, kind of letting them do their thing, wasn't he?
Yeah, kind of interesting there. The empire that came before the Babylonians and Nebuchadnezzar was the Assyrians. They took out the 10 northern tribes. Their practice was to play, what do you call that? Not duck, duck, goose, Chinese fire drill, where everybody changes places.
Oh, musical chairs?
Musical chairs, that works. So he took Israel away and brought in other people to replace them.
Okay.
And he did that the Assyrians did that everywhere that they conquered.
Okay.
The Babylonians didn't. Their practice was just to pull people into the Euphrates river plain, the area around between the Tigris and the Euphrates, and just stock it with tons of people and leave the land relatively empty. So when the Jews from Judea,
Like control them in a city. Right.
yeah, and populate their home country.
Okay.
So the northern 10 tribes, Israel, had seen a big influx of foreigners. They became the Samaritans.
I thought the Samaritan was just an area just northwest of Jerusalem, a certain
Yeah,
area where
Samaria.
they interbreed. So it was just
But yeah,
a larger area.
the reason there was a lot of interbreeding there ethnically was because the Assyrians had taken out a bunch of Israelites and dumped in a bunch of foreigners.
okay.
But in the southern kingdom, that didn't happen. They took out a bunch of Judahites, but they didn't replace them. Eventually, then, the Medes and Persians sent them back, and they just took over their same place again. Now, there were still poor people in the land. I mean, it wasn't absolutely empty, but yeah, different policies for different empires.
Wait, was it Hezekiah God was telling to go ahead and surrender? Hezekiah? When the Babylonians were coming in and were going to sack it? And he didn't. He tried to sneak out, and they ended up...
I think you're thinking of Jeremiah and probably Zedekiah.
Zedekiah. Okay, yeah,
At the
Zedekiah.
end here. Yeah, Jeremiah told a number of kings there, you guys need to take your medicine. Don't fight this.
Yeah.
And of course,
Okay,
they all fought it.
Zedekiah.
Paid
Okay.
price for it. Yeah.
Thanks.
So that's a quick overview of these 6 chapters. Now I want to look at a couple of interconnections, people that Daniel would have known. And I want to start with some of the Israelite kings. Well, what I actually mean is kings of Judah.
Yeah, there were no good kings of Israel.
Israel, yeah, they were all gone by that point. But Daniel's life, if he was born around 620, 621 BC or so, the first 10 years or so of his life would have overlapped with the reign of Josiah.
Oh.
And some things come to mind when you think of
Yeah,
Josiah.
it's like, oh, he starts reading the Word of God, and he goes, wow, we got to do this. We got to try
We
this.
got to do this stuff. Where's this been? Yeah. The guys discovered the book of the law.
Yeah.
Stuff's kind of addictive.
Oh, it's really good this week. Not that pansy stuff you gave us last
Now,
week.
don't be hating on the birthday cake bash. That was good.
Well, mine was like mushrooms and rainbows and...
You just weren't used to the taste of unicorn. That's all it was.
I smelled them at the zoo, and it was enough.
If you're going to keep talking, I'll just put that bunny rabbit up there.
Okay.
I got to quit? Okay. It's right there, though. If I
Yes.
need it. Okay.
Very handy.
Do you recollect, this is Bible trivia, do you recollect how Josiah died?
I kind of remember his son wasn't very good.
Yeah.
Wait, I think he didn't remove... He did a lot of things. He didn't remove the holy places of the other areas. So,
Some of the other false worship
yeah.
stuff.
His son didn't get him, did he?
No. Yeah, see, he did so much good stuff, and then he made a big mistake.
Oh, is he the one who showed? No. That was...
That was Hezekiah.
Yeah.
To the series. You're really close on that one, though. Well, okay, so I'm gonna show you a little map here. Let me get my pencil out because I want to draw some stuff here. So Judah, Jerusalem, right here. In Josiah's day, the strong country to the north was Assyria, to the south was Egypt. However, Babylon was a growing threat, and they attacked Assyria. And Assyria, over a few years, retreated to the west because they kept getting beat by the Babylonians. The Egyptians saw that, and they preferred to have up in the north confusion. They didn't want to see a Babylon that took over everything and became a massive superpower.
Yeah, the U.S. foreign policy.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So they decided, let's go up and help Assyria. Now, Josiah was not fond of that idea because the Assyrians had conquered the 10 northern tribes, and he viewed them as an enemy. So the Egyptians start going up the coast here to help out the Assyrians.
Okay.
Josiah, against God's command, decides he's going to stop them. So he comes around, and I don't actually have Megiddo on this map, but it's right about where that arrow points. And he met the Pharaoh and his army there. Necho was the name of that Pharaoh.
Okay.
And Necho said, go home. God's telling me that you're not supposed to be here.
Really?
Yeah. And Josiah wouldn't listen to him. So they met in battle. Egyptians fired a bunch of arrows. One of them hit him and apparently cut an artery or something. They hauled him back to Jerusalem in his chariot and he died.
Okay. Was that the dogs licking the blood out of that one too, or no? That was
Yeah,
okay. Never mind.
I think that was just the Ahab. So then Necho goes up here and they meet at Carchemish, and they held off the Babylonians for a couple years. There are historians that think Josiah's tactic there actually delayed them enough that it sealed the fate of the Assyrian army. It's hard to tell, but yeah. So that was Josiah's end.
Okay.
Which was not what it should have been.
Right.
He should have left the Egyptians well enough alone. As a result of that, when the Egyptians came back through a couple months later, the Jews had put Josiah's son, Jehoahaz, on the throne.
Okay.
And Necho said, nah, he's not going to be king. So he deposed him. He'd been on the throne like 3 months, and appointed his older brother to the throne.
Josiah's older brother?
No.
Or no, Josiah's older son?
Jehoahaz's, yeah,
Okay.
the older son. Jehoiakim is how we know him. Interesting fact. Where's this at? 2 Chronicles 35:25, if you want to go look. Jeremiah, the prophet, sang at Josiah's funeral.
Really?
Well,
What's the verse?
The way the text puts it is,
Okay.
he did a lament, but
Okay.
I mean, it would be the equivalent of a song.
Okay.
Yeah. 2 Chronicles 35:25. And Daniel would have been probably about 10 years old at that point, 609 BC.
Okay.
It's almost inconceivable that he didn't attend that funeral. What an odd thought to see that this king who had been so good rediscovered the law, reinstituted a whole bunch of good things, and then disobeyed God and died, and was was buried on account of that. And to see Jeremiah there at the funeral too, I mean, we don't have a record of that aspect of Daniel being there, but he was from an elite family in the capital city, and these funerals were usually very large events. It's almost inconceivable that he wouldn't have been there.
2 Chronicles 35:25. Let's see. There it is. Jeremiah also uttered a lament for Josiah, and all the singing men and singing women have spoken of Josiah in their laments to this day. They made these a rule in Israel. Behold, they are written in the laments. Huh.
Yeah. Yeah. Funny thing to think of, right? I mean,
Yeah,
those-
it's just
those
the providence
three
of
guys-
God is just an amazing. You know how little things He uses to come up big in a little while.
And you wonder what lessons Daniel took away from that, you know?
Yeah, I mean, there was probably a revival going on as a kid, so he witnessed all
Yeah.
that stuff, and you know, Josiah's story is kind of like, boom, it just happened. He read it, he goes, good idea. Everybody, you know, the whole country.
Yeah.
And so there's probably you know, a lot of passionate people. You know, it's always the convert that goes, it's a little wild.
New
He's
convert.
good.
Why is it so fun to eat the ears first?
I don't
Is
know.
that just because they're at the top?
Maybe you think of mowing a yard. That's usually what we. Never mind.
I won't go there. It's a lot of sugar. Okay, so that's Josiah. I'm going to skip over Jehoiakim. He co-ruled with his son Jehoiakim. for
Kim
most-
and Ken? Huh.
Papa was Kim with an M like Mike. And son was Kin with an N like
Nimrod.
nuclear. Nimrod. A great hunter before the Lord. I'm gonna jump to Jehoiakim, the son.
Okay.
They co-ruled most of that time.
It's not a very flattering picture. He looks kind of diabolical.
There's a reason for that. He was a disobedient,
Got like a poker face.
and naughty boy.
There you
He's the next to the last king of Judah,
go. Okay.
this Jehoiakim.
Before Hezekiah. Is it Hezekiah was the last one?
Zedekiah.
Zedekiah.
I knew what
I
you were
gotta-
thinking.
I gotta get-
I knew what you were thinking. You can remember that because the last king
Z.
starts with a Z, the
Yeah.
last letter of the alphabet.
I will not mess that up again.
Well, you might, but
Today, I will not mess it up
today.
again.
Jehoiakim is
Now, who is
also...
that?
Was the last king Hezekiah? Jehoiakim is also referred to by a couple other variations on his name, Jeconiah or even Coniah in other Kings Chronicles places, but it's the same guy. You can tell from the context, just a different way of saying his name.
Okay. Short for Andrew and Drew. No.
Yeah, Drew,
Alright,
Andy, yeah, it's the same thing. He was deported to Babylon, deposed by Nebuchadnezzar, and deported in 597.
Okay.
So that's what, 8 years after Daniel?
Okay.
Another guy that got deported at that same time in 597, the second deportation, we'll come back to him, was Ezekiel,
Oh,
the
really?
prophet Ezekiel. So
Nice.
those are two guys we know by name that were deported in that second deportation, 597.
I thought they got all the good ones on the first round.
Right.
Eh,
Well, maybe
He must have showed himself
most of them.
worthy.
Yeah, I don't know. It seems like, well, I'll come back to that. It seems like Ezekiel and Daniel were about the same age as each other, at least roughly.
Interesting.
But anyhow, interesting thing about Jehoiakim, he was deposed. You're no longer king. We're going to make your uncle king, Zedekiah. And you're coming as a captive to Babylon. Well, guess who by this point is a high-ranking official in Babylon?
Daniel.
Daniel, you guessed right.
Did he didn't? Was he made a eunuch as well?
Not that we know of.
Okay.
He had sons in Babylon with him. Were they
Okay.
Were they brought to Babylon with him, or did he have them there? We don't know. Okay, so this is what's kind of interesting. This tablet that I can't read, but I know some people that can, is one of 4 or 5 that were recovered from Babylon that mention the name of Jehoiakim. They record rations that were given to him.
Jehoiakim or Ken?
Ken.
Ken. Okay.
The son.
Okay.
And his 5 sons are mentioned on this particular tablet.
Nice.
And the biblical text tells us that he was taken from Jerusalem as a prisoner to Babylon, and that 37 years later he was released by the king that followed Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar reigned a long time. But he was actually let out of prison. They gave him good clothes to wear, gave him good food to eat, let him eat at the king's table, basically kind of honored him in a way. Of course, he would have been an older guy by that point too. But it's just fascinating to me to think, in the city of Babylon, David, the youngster, who has proven himself faithful.
Daniel.
Daniel, thank you.
This is the first time you've messed up on this second take.
Yeah, well, I'm getting a little dry.
Leave me to be the one who messes it up. Okay?
Okay, Hezekiah.
Exactly.
It's fascinating to think Daniel, young buck, highest level of government you can get. Mm-hmm. His king, Jehoiakim, comes in and is imprisoned in the same city.
Uh-huh.
And maybe Daniel, as the top administrator, even oversaw the fact that he got his regular rations. You know, he may have had to sign off on that, or I don't know. It's just what a topsy-turvy world.
So what's in those inscriptions?
Jehoiakim and his 5 sons.
Yeah.
Rations.
Oh.
Yeah, probably for grain, rations for grain. 10 selah, I forget exactly how much a selah is. It's about a day's worth of ration. And he was getting 10 yakuukinu, Babylonian
Easy for you to say.
pronunciation. But then it goes on to say the king of Judah's son, Jehoiakim's son, Jehoiakim.
Oh, okay.
And 2.5 selah, that's quite a bit less, for his 5 sons. So he was getting a little more than what was necessary to keep him alive because he was a king. And probably could trade it for cigarettes or whatever they do. Well, that's what they do nowadays. I don't know what they did back then. They were chewing cot or something. I don't know.
Huh.
Okay. Well, you even wonder if Daniel had a hand in his release after Nebuchadnezzar had passed off the scene. Maybe. I don't know.
Did they say he was released?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. You can read about that in Jeremiah 52.
Did he cause more trouble down the road, or?
No.
Okay.
No. But
He had enough.
he would have been, I mean, he'd been in prison then for almost 40 years.
Oh. That'll take it out of you.
Yeah. Yeah, I can only imagine. And last but not least, Zedekiah.
Yes.
So,
He's the last king.
right? He is the last king.
Now, is he the one who begged for 15 more years? Are we back to Hezekiah?
We're back to Hezekiah.
Okay.
I knew you were going to bring up something related to Hezekiah. That's
I
good,
just
John.
can't
That's
help
good.
it.
He can't help himself.
Well, it was Hezekiah who begged for 15 more years, and then he ended up showing everybody all the
Squandered
treasures. So it probably would have been better he had not got the 15 years and done that.
You know, they both have a Z in their name
Yes.
and some E's and a K.
What point are you trying to make? No.
Well,
you
phonetically,
make an
they're
excuse for
very
me?
similar.
Oh, I know. Okay.
Okay.
Well, I haven't talked about him in a while, so I'm straightened out again.
Zedekiah would have been brother to Jehoiakim. So he was the uncle of Jehoiakim.
Okay.
And Nebuchadnezzar put him on the throne. He was rebellious. And when Nebuchadnezzar came in for the last time, he actually killed Zedekiah's sons
5
in front
sons
of him
in front of him,
and then took his eyes out.
and then brought him.
And then brought him back to Babylon,
Yeah.
where Daniel is the highest administrator of the province. And here he's got another king of Judah there as a hostage, and he's blinded and old. Daniel saw some weird stuff. There was never a place in the book of Daniel where I felt like this kind of discussion really fit. I mean, where do you put that? What chapter do you put that in? But It's something Daniel would have experienced. Seeing these large groups of deportees coming in
Right?
and seeing these kings
The
absolutely humiliated.
VIPs.
Yeah. And Zedekiah in really bad shape. Brutal world.
Is that a picture of them? Those are his
Yeah.
sons there, and that's
Yeah, exactly. Popping out the old eyeballs. Moving
I wonder
along.
who got that job.
So, wrap up here with 3 other figures from the Old Testament that Daniel would have had interaction with. Almost. Well, we know he did with Jeremiah the prophet, because he
Okay.
quotes from him in chapter 9. He almost certainly would have had some interaction with Ezekiel, and then, of course, the leader of the group that returned, Sheshbazzar. I cannot imagine they were not familiar with each other as well. But let me just
Yeah, Ezekiel's got some dreams that even Daniel couldn't understand.
right. Visions that we still scratch our heads. And Jeremiah, I mean, picture of him here being hauled out of the pit. There's so many things in the life of Jeremiah that one could illustrate. Daniel, as a kid, would have known Jeremiah the prophet speaking in Jerusalem to the kings, telling people to turn from their way, their evil way.
He was the prophet none of the kings wanted to hear from, wasn't he?
Yeah. In fact, they tried to kill him a couple times, or came pretty close, and there were some others that stood up and said, nah, we probably shouldn't. But interesting little
The
tidbit.
Reubens.
Right, yeah. Let's not kill him. In Jeremiah 29, he sent a scroll to the deportees, the Judeans in Babylon, shortly after the second deportation, when Ezekiel and Jehoiakim were taken.
Okay.
And in that, one of the things he says in that scroll is, you guys need to settle down, build a life, marry, have kids. You're going to be there a while. So don't fight it. 70 years.
So Jeremiah sent that.
Sent that letter to him. And that's recorded in Jeremiah 29. He sent another letter to the exiles. Jeremiah himself never went to Babylon. When
Now, Jeremiah did Lamentations too, right? No?
Gary, we need some help. Help up front.
Who wrote Lamentations? That was Jeremiah too, wasn't it?
We'll get back to you on that one.
Okay.
The audience thinks probably so. Sorry. That's an embarrassing one not to know, right?
Hezekiah, I think, wrote. No.
I'm going to just take another bite of this rabbit.
You're like torturing the rabbit. Just put it out of its
It's
misery.
yours for now. You stumped me, you get the podium. Okay.
If I remember right, we don't know for sure, but it seems to me there's something in 2nd Chronicles that kind of mentions it, but Lamentations doesn't say who it is, and we just don't know for sure. So we ascribe it to Jeremiah, but that's it.
Okay.
I don't feel so bad then.
I don't know if they.
Oh, I think you should feel bad.
I still feel bad. Okay.
I don't know if they heard that, Chris.
We're not sure. Our authority was saying we're not sure who wrote the Book of Lamentations.
Who's your authority?
There may be some tradition. Who brings the band?
Yes, there you go.
Whoa. I think you better settle down.
The Lord speaketh from afar.
Okay. He sent another scroll to Babylon with the third deportation.
Okay.
And it had a message about the downfall of Babylon that the reader was supposed to read, then roll up the scroll, tie a stone around it, throw it in the Euphrates and let it sink, and add, the same way that scroll sank, Babylon's going to sink. So, He specifically sent
Sounds like a Jonah speech.
a little bit, yeah, yeah. He specifically sent a couple of scrolls that are recorded in the book of Jeremiah itself to Babylon. That was in Jeremiah 51, if you're curious at home. And then, of course, Daniel in chapter 9 specifically states that he read a prophecy in the book of Jeremiah in 538 BC, toward the end of his life. That's what prompted his prayer of repentance and his anticipation that the people would return. So there's, even long after Jeremiah's passed off the scene, he has Jeremiah's scroll in his possession. Ezekiel is an interesting one, probably about the same age. Just real quickly here. So Daniel is living here in Babylon. Ezekiel gets deported, comes around, and ends up somewhere probably to the southeast of Babylon. So he goes even farther from home than Daniel.
Oh, so he doesn't stay in Babylon. He's
Right.
okay.
The reference that we have in Ezekiel is to the Chebar or Kebar River, which, sorry about that. I was trying to hit my pen here. Which is right here, where Babylon is right here.
Okay.
So we don't know where. There's not a city name given, but he's somewhere in this region. So Ezekiel is not far. I mean, this could be, 50 miles away, but he's not far from Daniel. And I just find it difficult, again, to imagine that the two didn't know each other. Two prophets of God, and live in essentially the same place, definitely the same time. Ezekiel, of course, amazing book. Artist's rendition here of one of his visions
Wheels,
from early in the
wheels,
book.
and more wheels.
Yeah, wheels within wheels and eyes on them, and he looks up and sees a sea of glass above him and fire, and yeah, kind of crazy.
And that's all so easily interpreted.
Right. Okay. And of course, his infamous inscribe a brick with Jerusalem, build a siege ramp around it. This is before Jerusalem actually fell.
Okay.
Put an iron plate between yourself and it. A lot of symbolic stuff foretelling the fall of Jerusalem. And of course, eventually it did fall. Well, it wasn't even that long. So Daniel, there's no record of it in the text. But again, it's just hard to imagine these two prophets of God living relatively close to each other, didn't know of each other, and perhaps even interact in some way or another.
Yeah, you kind of don't know what they're going to write about and what they're not going to.
Yeah.
I mean, like in Revelation, it doesn't talk about Jerusalem getting sacked in 70 AD.
Mm-hmm.
Odd.
Yeah. Well, we think it was written like in 90 or so, and that's past at that point.
Yeah.
But
You would think you'd make a note of it.
last one I wanted to point out was just Sheshbazzar, who was the leader of the group that returned in 538, sent back by Cyrus. Again, there's no record of Daniel interacting with these folks, but we know he was alive at that time and fairly high administrator in the Medo-Persian Empire. And so he could have even overseen some of the preparation and, hey, yeah, there's vessels in the treasury that actually belong to the temple. Make sure you get all those, because the text says that they sent them back.
The what? The
temple treasures,
Right.
instruments, bowls, cups.
They never mentioned the ark going, did they?
Nope. The ark is not mentioned.
Odd little thing.
Yeah.
They think it's maybe underneath or hidden.
Yeah.
Dun dun dun.
Crated away in a U.S. government vault.
Yes. just as in Indiana Jones.
Okay. we got to wrap up here. I got 5 different observations I'd like to make that kind of come from this. One is it's quite remarkable how long Daniel lived and what period he lived through. Everything from the old Judean kingdom through the entire Babylonian Empire, the life of that empire, and up until the return. He didn't participate in the return, but he saw the return some 70 years later. Quite an amazing life, and there weren't many people that lived that long back then. There were some, but it was unusual.
Yeah.
His moral character, from the very first time we meet him until the end of his life, is just amazing. I think it's what is it that drives something like that?
Kind of right. I mean, you think of like Joseph, Joshua, from a young age, they did the right thing, despite a lot of pressure. It kind of made him ready for the next thing God gave him. He builds. His tests are to build that character. Because if a tree doesn't have any wind, it doesn't grow strong enough and it just falls over.
You were just mentioning the way Hezekiah squandered the end of his life. And I don't think that's all that uncommon. People that for a time that grow and are vibrant and then just kind of, I don't know, throw in the towel or give in to sin or that kind of stuff. And I'm reading between the lines here, but I'm thinking Daniel kept renewing his commitment. I mean, how else do you explain from a young buck to an old geezer, and there's never a break.
Even the prayer where they're catching him in, when they put him in the lion's den, he could have at least closed the window.
Yeah.
and prayed and not been such an easy. But he just trusted in God over that little, a thing that could have been easily hidden.
Yeah, it's just remarkable to me, the span of his faith, a strong faith, strong character. He stuck with it.
Yeah.
For decades and decades. That's unusual and it's inspiring. It's something to pattern our lives after. I'm amazed at God's placement of his servant here in the highest levels of a foreign government. That's also, like you said, reminiscent of Joseph.
Yeah.
Second in command.
He gets in with his enemies, not conniving wise, but just being a righteous guy and looking to God for the answers. And it just so impressed the people that he was held captive by. Yeah. And just knew that he was just honest, which nobody else was. But even the atheist trusts the Christian to a certain point.
Yeah. Well, and somebody saw that.
Yeah.
Nebuchadnezzar early on, but even many kings later, Darius and Cyrus. And I can't help but think, too, that this is a sign, Daniel's placement way up in government is a sign of God's care for his people. All of these folks are taken away from Judah, Jerusalem, a couple 100 miles, end up in Babylon, a foreign country, foreign place, foreign language, all this weird stuff. And who's ruling the province of Babylon? A Jew. their own countrymen.
Yeah.
How can you go through that and not say, I wonder if God's taking care of us even here? even in this foreign land. Of course, Daniel's communication with God is unusual. I mean, we have other examples, other prophets and stuff, but it's not your everyday run-of-the-mill kind of stuff. He's interacting with kings on this kind of thing. Again, kind of reminiscent of Joseph. It makes you wonder if, like Joseph, well, I mean, it's obvious in retrospect, but I would think it would have made them wonder if God isn't doing something large scale here. And with Joseph, he's pulling his people down into Egypt, started the sojourn, and is going to build a nation out of them down there. Here, he's disciplining his people, taking them out of the land, and yet he's protecting them. And you can see marvelous works done by a faithful servant of God. Okay. Last but not least, Daniel never went back.
So like Moses syndrome.
Yeah, a little bit. And it just reminds me of a couple of verses in Hebrews, 11:13, great hall of faith. All these died in faith without receiving the promises, but having seen them and welcomed them from a distance, and having confessed that they were strangers and exiles on the earth. That seems to have been Daniel's perspective too. He wasn't enjoying peace in the land of promise, but he was content and faithful. A little later on in Hebrews 11, verse 39, all these, having gained approval through their faith, did not receive what was promised because God had provided something better for us, so that apart from us, they should not be made perfect.
Was Abraham listed in Hebrews 11?
Yeah.
But he did see Christ, did he not?
Yeah, he...
Because, I mean, even Jesus said, he saw my day and was glad.
I think from a distance, though, I mean, if the three travelers included
The two angels
Christ,
and the, yeah.
But Hebrews 11 also says he was waiting for a he was waiting for a city built by God. He wasn't looking for an earthly city. And I mean, he saw some descendants, but he didn't see the fulfillment of that, like the sand of the seashore.
Right. Oh, right, okay.
He didn't see the entire land being occupied by his descendants. I mean, God said, I'll give you this land. Well, Abraham couldn't take the whole thing by himself,
right,
or with his descendants in the next couple generations. So there were other things that he didn't. And yeah, I mean, the Messiah, he didn't see the fulfillment of all that. But I see our time is up, and I'm out of material. So
you're out of bunny ears, too.
Yeah, I'm just about down to the eyes, which, I think that'll be tasty. You know what? I should close this in prayer.
Sounds good.
Unless you didn't have any other questions, so I'll close in prayer.
I've had enough.
Okay. Lord, thanks so much for the book of Daniel. As we review these first 6 chapters, we're just amazed at the way you worked through a faithful servant of yours. We're really impressed by the example that he sets, and we would like to attain something like that ourselves, not in terms of position or pride or anything, but just in being faithful to you. So help us in our various places, wherever we're at, whatever people we interact with, whatever tasks we have. Help us to be faithful to you, and we give you the praise and honor and thanksgiving for your love for us and the way that you provide for us. In your name I pray. Amen.
Is that actually the writing on the wall?
Mm-hmm.
Is that what was actually said?
Mm-hmm. And it's in Aramaic.
Wow.
Remember what it says? Meaning?
It's like tonight you're going to...
Oh, no, I meant the Aramaic. You're very close. Well, not all that close. How did I miss his eyeball?